Now, getting employment for a person with disabilities can prove to be very difficult despite stringent labour laws instructing employers to give priority to such persons. Mandy Lattimore is a consultant for people with disabilities and she advocates for their rights at the workplace. She says there are constant challenges for persons with disabilities, from getting a qualification to getting placement and, of course, within a job. But to tell us more, we've got Mandy in studio with us. Nice to have you, Mandy. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, Leanne. Nice to be here.
Tell us about your sort of your life being a disabled person.
Well, I became disabled 33 years ago from a climbing accident, and decided that I was actually going to just carry on my life as best I could, even though my legs didn't work, and became an activist because there were no facilities for people with disabilities in that stage. Nothing, not even parking bays or anything. So have spent the last 33 years fighting for rights for people with disabilities.
Yeah. And you were telling me that you became disabled. It was while you were mountain
climbing?
climbing?
I was climbing and I slipped and fell and dislocated my spine and lost the use of my legs, but didn't stop my life. I still water ski, snow ski, scuba dive, fly standing on top of an aeroplane.
I love it.
All my dreams that I've really wanted to do, I've done. I traveled extensively, became a travel agent, and then eventually always have worked within the disability sector, but decided to become an advocate and become a consultant, because I believe that I've got a specific skill set that is unique.
Yeah.
I've had the experience, and then I can get into the workplace and help other people.
Yeah. But advocating for an easier life within the workplace, how difficult is it as a disabled person?
Well, there are three different barriers that one first has to overcome. The first barrier, I think, are perceptions, people's perceptions of what is a disability and how to react to somebody who has a disability. So it's sensitization, which is one of my three prongs that I do. You go in and you dispel the myths about disability. How do you actually approach somebody with a visual impairment or a hearing impairment and become comfortable with communicating with that person? And then obviously the second biggest barrier is our physical barriers.
Yeah.
If you remove these physical barriers, you will be able to work within an environment. If you have a reception counter that is so high that the person behind, if they are short or in a wheelchair, can't see the person in front, that becomes a physical barrier. If you actually use the principles of universal access and design, you make the environment accessible for everybody. So it's inclusive of everybody. The elderly, people of short stature, able-bodied people, temporarily impaired people, and therefore you're not trying to shoehorn a person with a disability into a specific job. I think people have these perceptions that, because you're blind you have to be a receptionist, which is not true. I think if you can actually create an environment that is open and accessible to everybody, then anybody could do. You want the best person for the job despite their disability.
Absolutely. Now, we actually had one of the most wonderful guests last week also talking about disabilities. He was a young man and he was, had a very unfortunate accident where he was hit by a car and he lost both of his legs. Now, when this happened to him, 9 years old, couldn't go back to school. He loved playing soccer, but he couldn't do it. Now, what really came out for me was the fact that the school couldn't accommodate him.
Correct.
And that's a very bad thing.
This is exactly what we've been fighting for, and inclusion with we have all the laws, we have all the doctrines. People are saying you must include people. The government says we have to have 2% of our workforce employed. But how do you employ somebody who has a substandard education because they haven't been able to attend the correct schools or the correct universities? So many people in university or colleges are taking courses that they feel they can only take that course because that area is the wheelchair accessible or the accessible area for them for their disability. So it does preclude people. And we are trying very hard to try and make our tertiary education and our schools inclusive. But it's a long process because one has to change the physical barriers, and sometimes it's quite expensive.
If we have to compare ourselves to the rest of the world, how are we doing in terms of catering for disabled people?
I think, to be really honest, we have everybody talking the talk, but very few people walking the walk. Even our government, and I work very closely with a number of local and national governments, to try and get facilities. Transport. Our public transport is useless. And we are trying, but it's a 25-year plan. Okay, with a 5-year plan, but at the moment, there's nothing. Very difficult. Our e-tolls, if we have to rely on other people to give us lifts because we can't use public transport. But then what's going to happen when people say we're not going to drive that distance to take you to work anymore? And that's very, very, very difficult for us. So it's not just getting a job or keeping a job. It's actually how do you get to the job? How do you stay in an area that you can actually access that job?
Yeah.
And again, employers, they get quite nervous. They think, oh my gosh, I'd love to employ somebody, but it's going to be so expensive to rearrange my entire environment or purchase specific aids for people with disabilities. There's wonderful technologies today like JAWS, which is a system where you can talk to a computer and it'll type for you, and vice versa. So if you don't have the physical abilities to type or you're visually impaired, you can have a hearing, talking thing. And there is a South African Disability Development Trust, which actually allows employers to apply for these specific aids or assistive devices, which that will be purchased for the person to work in an environment.
Very quickly, Mandy, your website address where people can get some more details if they'd like assistance?
We've got various things, but you can get hold of me at mandy@universalsolutions.co.za.
Okay, that's the best way to get hold of you.
That's all my mobile number, yes.
Okay, well, let's give out the email. So it's mandy@universalsolutions.co.za.
Correct.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mandy Lattimore joining us here, talking about disabilities and the issues surrounding us, was challenges, one could call them.